Well, Sam Frost, thank you so much for joining us on Undistracted. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Your new book, Believe, it's great. I've got a copy of it here and I really enjoyed having a read of it, but it comes from an initiative that you started with your sister, Christine, a mental health initiative specifically. Tell us a little bit about the heart behind that project.
Well, we created a mental health platform a couple of years ago now because so many people were reaching out to us. I've been quite open over the years about my struggles with mental health. And during those times, people would reach out with emails or direct messages or even in the street, and they'll share with me things that I don't think that they've spoken about before. And I realised that everyone felt alone, but so many people had similar stories.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be a great initiative to create a community where people can hear like-minded stories so that they know that they're not alone. And we've got a psychologist on board as well who gives advice as well for people who may not be able to afford or have the resources available for them. So that's how it started, and then it's just steamrolled into doing youth workshops, and now we've created a book. So yeah, it's our passion project, and we're really proud of it.
And in sharing some of your own story, it's obviously a really vulnerable thing to open up in deeper ways, I suppose, about what your journey with mental health, anxiety, depression has really been like. Why did you want to share so openly about what you had gone through?
Well, growing up, especially during my teenage years, the conversations around mental health just weren't happening. I didn't even know that much about it. So I grew up thinking that something was wrong with my brain. Truly, I thought something was wrong with me, and I knew that I was different. I was very sad all the time. I was really angry. I had a lot of pain, and I thought that I would just live my life messed up. And I thought that I would never be able to be successful. I thought I would never be able to have a steady life or be able to manage my emotions. And then I realised what I was actually struggling with was depression and anxiety, and it's actually quite common. And so that's why I am so passionate about talking about mental health, because so many times, especially when you're in the thick of it, you feel very isolated and you feel like stands. So that's why it's so important for me to talk about it and share my story, because I think a lot of people relate.
Yeah, and was there something that particularly triggered those experiences of anxiety and depression for you, or do you think it has just been something that has been part of your life in a really everyday sense?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting you say that, because I'm not sure. I mean, we had challenges in our childhood. We had quite an unstable childhood and a lot of, traumas for us. And so we had that. But on top of that, my mum also struggles with mental illness. So I'm not sure how much is genetic and how much is our upbringing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually not too sure. So I think, or maybe even it's column A, column B.
Yeah.
But I surrounded by it, and or maybe it's learnt behaviour as well. I'm not 100% sure, but that's that I've been working through with my psychologist over the years.
And those are questions that so many people would be asking. What is the source of this? How do I deal with it? And what are some of the triggers even? But also as well, in the feelings of anxiety and depression, I think for a lot of people, you can feel like it's a setback. Like, if I didn't feel this way, I'd be able to do this or this or this, Did you ever feel that way, like you were being held back from some kind of life because of what you were going through?
Absolutely. I think that, well, even when I was like last year and the years that I've been at home and away, for example, I was in my dream job doing something that I was so passionate about and that I loved. And yet on the weekends, I would sit at home and stay in bed all weekend in a dark room and cry. And that's what I would do. I wasn't living my life. I would go to work, I would come home and cry. And that is honestly what I would do. And I realized that I wasn't living my life and I felt like it was setting me back. And that's when I decided, I went to a mental health retreat at the beginning of last year, because I just realized that I can't live my life drowning in this depression. And, and as soon as, like, I can go to work and I'm happy and bubbly, but as soon as I'm by myself, I really struggled to be alone with my own thoughts with myself, and that's when I realized that I really needed to do something dramatic to try and change, and then I quit my job as well to prioritize my mental health, because again I felt like I my life, and I wasn't, like, I just felt like I wasn't happy, and I had all these beautiful things around me, and it made me realize that I needed to heal my core and heal my trauma and my childhood, and things that have happened in my childhood, to be free, to set myself free.
Do you think that that's a common experience for people? Because I think a lot of people would be really surprised to hear that this was your reality, you know, going to a job that, as you say, was your dream job, that a lot of people admire you for and would look up to you for being able to go and do. But do you think it's common for people to have these experiences that do look so great, but then also have these struggles that are in so many ways unknown to people?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, and again, this goes back to keep having these conversations about mental health, because there is a stigma attached to it, and it is changing and it's moving in the right direction. But people assume that if you have the beautiful home, if you've got the beautiful job, if you've got the beautiful partner, that means that you're happy, and that means you're immune to mental illness, which isn't the case at all. No one no one can dodge it or whatever. If it doesn't matter what lifestyle you have, the core of us, we're all exactly the same. You know, it doesn't matter what job you have or how much money you have. And I think that, like, I remember saying to my psychologist, I said, I don't understand. Like, you know, I'm doing all this work and I'm putting in all this effort and I'm a good person, and why am I still struggling? And she goes, mental illness doesn't discriminate. You know? Like, it's a free for all. So I think that's why it is important to keep having these conversations, and don't assume just because from the outside things look like they're going really well that they are, you know?
And despite the struggle that you were going through, though, you talk about in Believe how you still found joy in hardship, and that you even say that it is something that can bring about real good in our lives. How did you get to that place?
Doing the work. I used to have quite a victim mentality when I was younger. I used to be like, and anytime I would get a knock or be criticised, like not even in my job, like just in life, or have a setback, or someone would die that was close to me, or whatever it may be, I'd be like, oh, this is so unfair, life's so unfair, blah, blah, blah. And I became angry, and I lived in that victim mentality. And so I had to do the work to change to change my perspective on life, to change my perspective on what was happening and the ups and downs. And so now I feel like I'm at a place where even when I'm going through it, I think to myself, there's going to be a beauty in all of this, and there's going to be a purpose, and there's going to be a room for growth and lessons. And I think that when you think of it like that, then it sets you free, because you surrender to the experience and go, what am I learning? And I think that, and I think connection to faith has a huge thing to do with it. For me personally, I just have to have faith that this is what's supposed to be happening, and there's something higher that's looking out for me, and I truly have to trust in that. And I think that when I lose faith and hope, and then I lose my light, that's when I switch back into victim mentality. So it is a huge thing for me, to just surrender and trust the process, and trust that this is where I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
So what are some of the things that have really helped you get to that place where you do find hope, or you are able, I guess, to anchor yourself in this idea of a bigger picture? How have you found those sorts of things?
I've been practicing mindfulness for sure, and like centering myself. When I feel centered, and when I'm doing the things that I know are good for my soul and my core. So for example, I'll switch off technology. My room is my sanctuary. I don't have any technology in my room. And I do a lot of grounding exercises and techniques. And I always find, like, whether that be journaling, whether that be sitting in stillness, meditating, reading, I find reading a really grounding exercise. When I'm doing all these things, I feel like that reconnects me to myself, and that definitely reconnects me to my faith and my hope. And so, yeah, those are the things that I do.
Yeah, they're very useful practices. And I think for you personally, part of what maybe has compounded some of the feelings of anxiety that you've experienced has been life in the public eye, which has been a reality for you since 2014 when you originally decided to be on The Bachelor. Back then, as a 25-year-old, what was it that originally made you want to say yes to that show, to suddenly making your life something that was public?
Well, back in those days, reality TV wasn't what it was now. What it is now. Sorry, like it was. I think there was only one season of The Bachelor before that, which was Tim and Anna's, and they were a beautiful couple. And what didn't blow up. Instagram wasn't really that big of a thing back then. And I genuinely was so naive. I'm from Lilydale in a small town, and people, like, they marry their high school sweethearts, and I hadn't done that, and I felt, and I was like, shit. I was just thinking, like, I was so naive. I honestly was like, they're going to search the whole country for the most beautiful, perfect man, and I'm going to have the opportunity to date him. Oh my goodness, what a dream. Like, I had my rose-coloured glasses on. I just thought I was such a hopeless romantic. I was, and I thought, wow. Because I thought, I've got a good personality, and I think I would be able to just, if I met the right one, I would be able to. But I just didn't know how, because I was in a small town. And then I was just, oh, this is a great idea. Anyway. So it's pretty funny looking back and just thinking, oh, Sam. Little did you know, sweetie. But anyway, it set me on the path that I have now. So I can't, I don't regret anything that happens in life. But yeah.
You learned a lot through it. But it's also something that, affects the way that people see you, and people create a whole bunch of perceptions about you based on what they see through a, very limited picture of who you are that we see on television. So for you, what are the things that, you wake up and you get out of bed and you have a drive or a vision to really fulfill in your life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly working in mental health. I feel like when I'm doing that, I feel like your purpose when you feel like you're surrendered to the flow of life, if that makes sense. And so I feel like when I'm working in mental health and doing our youth workshops and I'm in this space, I feel like that's my purpose. And I love acting, and I feel like when I was on Home and Away, I love acting, I love entertaining, I love, all that sort of side of things. But I feel like that's the job that creates the platform so I can do what I do. So, yeah, I definitely, when I wake up in the morning and I realise, what I want to do and the space that I'm in, like even last night, actually, I was out with my boyfriend and we were just having dinner, and I read this message, and it was someone saying to me that the impact that I had had on their life, and I just sat there and I just cried and cried and cried. And I realised that, because you can get so caught up in if someone writes a mean comment on Instagram, or someone has, the media's written a yucky story or whatever it is, so caught up in that you remember my purpose. So exactly what you said, like when I wake up, I have to remember my purpose. And this morning I woke up, I remembered that message I received, and it gives you strength to keep going and to keep working in this field, and that it's all worth it. And it just makes me realise the difference that I am making to even a couple of people. It's worth it. So that's what I keep reminding myself.
Yeah, and one of the battles as well, I think, in doing some of that is that, and living in the public eye as well, is that you can so easily become caught in a comparison trap where you look at what you're doing and how it might compare to what someone else is doing. And then also even for each of us, just looking at lives like your own and others on social media, we then compare ourselves to the people that we see ourselves, you know, doing these great things. How have you personally dealt with comparison, both in the times where you've felt it, but also how you've actually tried to step away from doing it?
Yeah, certainly when I'm feeling really insecure, I can feel really self-conscious about appearance. I try my best to, you know, embrace it all and to accept myself for who I am. But there are moments when I'm just like, you feel like you're not pretty enough, you feel like you're not good enough, and then you're on social media and you're seeing everyone's highlight reel, and the images that they put out of themselves aren't necessarily true to who they are. And also people can look at mine as well and go, you know, I'm just as guilty as everybody else of putting, you know, the best photos of myself on Instagram.
Yeah, we all do it.
We all do it. And so I'm guilty of it myself. But when I am feeling self-conscious and insecure, I try and switch off social media, because it is the worst when you're feeling like that. If I'm feeling really exhausted and not in a great mental health space, I will just delete the Instagram app. I'll and even for a couple of days, and then I'll just out in the world, and then I think it's easier to get back to who I am and stop that comparison trap. But yeah, I think social media is a huge thing for a lot of people when it comes to sharing their lives, and just, you know, remembering how unique we are. And there's no one else in the world like us. Like, why would we want to change? You know, we're so special and so unique, and I truly believe that. But I'm like everybody else, I fall into feeling not good enough sometimes.
Yeah, and I like what you said there, having I think the self-awareness to go, hey, this isn't actually making me feel great. So now what do I do to just give myself a break from it? Like, we don't always have the self-awareness and the discipline to actually take those steps. So it's a good reminder to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-awareness is the key. Absolutely.
And I like what you say. I'm going to find the line here in Believe. You talk about this cliche that we hear where everything happens for a reason, which might be true, but then you say that we can end up living waiting for that reason to appear and hoping that we know what it looks like when it does. If you're living life in that way where you're waiting to understand why certain things have happened in your life, what does that actually look like? How would you know that you're doing that?
When I wrote that, I think so it was when I had been dating someone, and then it didn't work out. And then I was like trying to be like, well, what was the reason? What was the purpose? And so you're searching, and like that, it becomes quite exhausting. And sometimes you're searching for something that's not there. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, it just didn't work out. Like, I mean, say, Sam, like, you know, and I think that can cause some angst. And so, for example, using that as an example, searching for everything happens for a reason, I would end up like overanalyzing things and overthinking. And then you're in this, your head is spinning. And it causes angst instead of just surrendering and going with the flow and being like, well, I'm sure I'll figure it out soon enough, or so, you know, and surrendering to the experience, I think, is so important than searching for that reason, even though I believe there's a lesson to be learned in all the things that we do. But that sometimes it takes its time to come, and we can't wait for that. So, yeah, I just got tired of overanalyzing everything.
Yeah. And you're definitely not the only one who does that. But you talk pretty openly about how relationships have been something that you feel like you've struggled with, or that have been a real source of anxiety for you, particularly toward the end of the book. You, I think, really vulnerably share about a toxic relationship that you were in for quite a while. What were some of the things that were going on in that relationship that you became aware of that made it a toxic one?
Well, I think the first thing I noticed was him isolating me from my friends, and he really created an environment where it was just me and him. And he didn't want me to live independently. And at the time I was earning more money than him. He felt really uncomfortable about it, wanted me to quit my job. And like, but these are all really, they do it it's so sneaky. They do it in ways that at the time you're like, oh, that's a bit weird, but you don't really think about it. But what happened in that relationship was, because I had been open about my triggers and my mental health issues, he used that against me, and he was playing up and cheating on me and doing all sorts of things that I don't think anyway. Anytime I would try and make him accountable for what he was doing, he knew how to trigger me, so he would trigger me and then be like, pathetic, you've got issues, you're crazy, you're paranoid, all that language. And then I honestly believed that I was crazy and paranoid. And and so then you just end up making excuses, you become weaker, you become fragile. And then towards the end, my whole concept of reality was warped. Like, I didn't believe anything like that I thought anymore. Like, it was such a crazy time. I'd lost a heap of weight. I changed my appearance. Just to try and keep him happy. I kept trying to figure out ways to be happy. Yeah. And then ultimately I realised that I was in a relationship, and it took me a long time to realise that.
Yeah. And that's a really tough experience, I think, to come back from, and to not allow to overshadow other relationships that you end up in, whether they're romantic ones or simply friendships. And I think there's going to be a lot of people listening who look to you and look to others for advice in these kind of situations. So what would you say to that person who might have just realized, oh my gosh, I'm in a toxic relationship, what do I do? But who also might be wondering, how to actually build trust with people after something like that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because it's something I'll start with the next relationship after, because that is one of the most difficult things. I remember saying to my girlfriend and my psychologist, I said, the most difficult relationships are the good ones if you've been in abusive relationships. Because I was with Dave, beautiful Dave, who is my ex-boyfriend. He had to deal with all my insecurities, all my shit, I feel so like that poor bloke has been there with me through everything. And in hindsight, what I wish that I did in that relationship was see a psychologist when it was good. My advice moving forward for anyone who may be struggling, open communication. Now I'm seeing someone now, and like, we have got the best communication, because I've said, look, I've had these awful relationships. It is not your fault. And sometimes I'm guilty of self-sabotaging. I'll distance myself before they leave me. I assume that everyone's going to leave me because it's happened in the past. But what I learned from my relationship with Dave was that I probably should have seen a psychologist more regularly when things were good, because I absolutely butchered that. And we're still really good friends. We've got a lot of love for each other, which is great. And, a lot of that's healed. But, now moving forward, I think I have to be mindful. And it's something I'm working on still. It's an active process. I think what I'm going to do is start seeing a psychologist again more regularly, because I've started a new relationship and I don't want to ruin it. And I don't want my past to define me and define this relationship. I want it to be a clean slate. And so I'm about to go and see my psychologist, because I'm like, I don't want to screw this up because of my own. So that's what I'm actively working on. And I'm sure there's lots of people who, probably... and it's also self-awareness, like we said before. And so instead of, I even said, I even say, I'm like, I don't really trust men. And that's not true. Like, I've got beautiful men in my life. I've got lots of brothers. I've got beautiful friends. And it's just, being self-aware and catching yourself with that thought and going, that's not true. That's not true. That's because of your past. that's fear, and really getting to the truth of it all. But yeah, it's absolutely something that I have to work on. And in terms of people that are in it, see a psychologist, and your psychologist will help you get out. That's what mine did anyway. I said, she said, I think you're in an abusive relationship. And then we did really steps. So it wasn't abrupt. It wasn't, in my mind, she really helped me manage that as carefully, as painless. And so work with your psychologist, and they're expensive. You can go on mental health plans, then you can get free sessions. But it is the best investment you'll ever make. So absolutely go on.
There's so many ways to get help, and absolutely encourage people to look into those. And I'll put some links at the end of this podcast as well for people who might need that assistance. But Sam, I wanted to ask you as we wrap it up with a question that I do ask all of our guests. And on this podcast, as we've said, we're talking about how you can clear away some of the clutter and live your life focused on the things that do bring you purpose. So what would it mean to you to live an undistracted life that is anchored around some of the things that bring you meaning and bring you intention?
Oh, less social media and less digital time, and more time with my family, with the people that I love, doing things that I love, and living from a place of truth, and being mindful when you make decisions based on ego. And I think that's probably the best way to live your life truthfully and wholly.
A really good thought there, Sam. Thank you so much for taking time to share with us today. Everyone needs to check out your book, Believe. And again, really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.